and welcome, students. Remember our last lesson was on the rule of law. Now in this lesson, you're going to be learning about separation of powers. Now when we talk about separation of powers, it is the division of the powers of government between the executive, legislature and the judiciary. And the objectives for this lesson are, you should be able to know the meaning of separation of powers, the merit of separation of powers and the demerit of separation of powers. I'll be right back after this video. Students, in this lesson, you are going to be learning about separation of powers. Now remember our previous lesson was on the rule of law, and I said the rule of law is the absolute supremacy or predominance of law over everybody, including the rulers and the ruled. Now in this lesson, we are going to be talking about separation of powers. What is separation of powers? Separation of powers is defined as the separation or division of political powers and functions among the three arms of government, which is the executive, legislature, and judiciary. Each body should be constituted and be involved only in the administration of that department. For example, the executive should be solely involved in policy making and implementation. The legislature should also be involved in lawmaking in a state, and while the judiciary should be involved in the interpretation of law. Now, liberal writers believe that power is dangerous and argue that it is normally bad for men to enjoy an excessive amount of it. This theory was propounded by Baron Montesquieu in his book The Spirit of Laws. Argued that if the legislature and executive powers are in unity, there can be no liberty and freedom for the citizens of a country. He maintained further that if the same person enacts tyrannical laws, such laws will also be executed in a tyrannical manner. Bourdin, the French writer, also maintained that the prince should not administer justice in person, but should leave such matters to independent judges. Similarly, it is argued that if the rules are made by one group of people, applied or executed by a third party, it should be possible to prevent a situation. So students, the reason for separation of power is to promote freedom and liberty, to reduce excesses of performance, to ensure efficiency, to promote checks and balances, stable political system, and so many other reasons. I believe now you understand the meaning of separation of powers. Now the next thing here is the merit of separation of powers. What are the merits of separation of powers? Now the first merit here is freedom and liberty. Separation of power ensures what? Freedom and liberty. The freedom and liberty of individuals are safeguarded since the Constitution has these rights and courts are independent to protect them. We also have excesses of performance. This is another merit of separation of powers. It helps to remove excesses of performance on the part of the groups exercising the functions. We also have efficiency in administration. Separation of powers brings about efficiency in the administration of the country. Now everyone works independently. We also have checks and balances. This produces a proper coordination of functions since each organ acts as a check on the other. We have stable political system. As powers are separated and every organ is mindful of its functions, the society is better for it because a stable political system will result. Now we also have peaceful administration. Separation of powers make for a peaceful administration which equally produces an atmosphere for economic and political growth. Now, students, you can see that separation of powers promotes peaceful administration. Everyone work independently. There is nothing like interferences or excesses of performance. It is also democratic. That is another merit of separation of powers. It is democratic in nature. Separation of power is an essential attribute of modern political system. We also have absence of dominance. Separation of powers removes the tendency for a particular organ exercising dominance over others. It also prevents accumulation of powers in one place. This is achieved if the rules are made by a group, applied or executed by another, and interpreted by another group. Now, the next thing we are going to discuss about is the merit of separation of powers. I believe we understand the advantages or the merit of separation of powers. So we are going to look at the demerits. What are the demerits of separation of powers? Now, the first demerit here or disadvantage is factor of rigidity. A rigid application of the principle of separation of powers can hinder the smooth running of government. When the application is rigid, it can hinder the smooth functioning of government. Another demerit here is checks and balances. This can bring about the inability of government to take prompt and quick decisions on matters that needed urgent attention. We also have abuse of power. Separation of powers can also lead to abuse of government powers. The possibility of separation of powers, checking the abuse of power and violation of rights of citizens, cannot be achieved through separation of powers. Another demerit here is total separation of powers is not visible. This is because there are areas of interferences noticeable in the exercise of their functions. Yes, there are some areas of interferences that make separation of power not really visible enough. Now, there is delay. It can cause delay and affect performance. That is another demerit. It can delay and affect performance. Checks and balances can delay and affect each arm's performance in the decision making process. So, students, you can see that checks and balances can affect or cause delay in performance. I believe you don't understand the demerits of separation of powers and the meaning of separation of powers. This is where I'll end the lesson. Until next time, and bye. Alright, I believe by now you should please understand that separation of powers is the structural division of the powers of government between the executive, legislature, and the judiciary. See you next time, and bye.